enjoying this journey though of, being out there and social media and on all these platforms?
Well, it's brand new to me. I mean, I'm 50 years old. I've been in policing for, it's 20 years now. And I can tell you, there's all sorts of examples of police officers on social media. I'm not going to dance, and I'm not going to do any, skits or anything like that. I just talk. I just get on this. Our podcast, we talk about the gang subculture. We talk about policing in general. Sometimes I talk about motivating stuff. Just get out there. But I mean, I know there's a culture that really likes to hear the police talk. There's an audience there. Police officers tend to have a tendency to not like this forum, and sometimes you get criticized for putting yourself out there. I don't know why, whether it's, jealousy or, it's just not part of the job that they traditionally. But, nowadays we got to get, information out. There's a gang problem in the city of Toronto, and, not a lot of people think we have a gang problem, but, if we emphasize it a little bit more or talk about it and talk about the solutions that are, that we have, people are better educated and more apt to be supportive of that initiative. Or, like we're trying to do with social media, more so, especially our TikTok account, is target young kids that are on the cusp of getting involved in the gang subculture or already involved.
No, that's interesting to go where they're at. And obviously TikTok is one of the places that Gen Z and the millennials are hanging out. So.
Yeah, I just had a video that I put up, and I was talking about and this was on TikTok. I was talking about a study that was done in the Chicago area by Sudhir Venkatesh, and it was just about drug dealing and how the guy was released the financial book from this drug deal from this gang, and I put it up. I talked about it, and man, the people that are viewing it, there's over, I think, 60K now. But of course, not all positive. Apparently there's some drug dealers on there that are making some nasty comments. So, I mean, I'm glad that TikTok has the control. You can control the comments. Can't really, you can let the comments that are appropriate out there. There's a few that are pretty derogatory towards policing or myself or whatever, but you got to have thick skin when you're doing this, as you probably know. Yeah,
you can get hit in any way possible, right? But you're putting yourself out there, and if people don't stand up, we're not resolving anything, are we?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a problem that nobody wants to think about. It comes across, gang violence comes across on your 2-minute ticker when you're watching city TV or whatever channel you're watching, right? Wherever you are, and then you forget about it. And I think a channel like this, really gets into, on a channel, but like a live stream or whatever. I mean, when you're talking about the subculture and you're talking about it in depth, like this morning, I was talking about an essay that was written by a gang member, and it had talked about a speaker coming into his school when he was in grade 2 and talking about, these are the ways to stay out of gang violence and stay away. And he had the thought process in this interview, in this essay that he wrote, that that was too late at grade 2. That's 6 to 7 years old. That was too late. And this is somebody from the community that has been exposed to the gang subculture, grew up in a neighborhood, and he talks even more about it in the essay about Bloods and the Crips and having to wear the color blue because his neighborhood represents the Crips area. So reading stuff like that, I mean, kind of opens people's eyes. And these are essays from people in Toronto. They're not the U.S. This is what I'm talking about, Crips. This essay was actually published in a book called Hood Habits, and it was a collection of essays from people in the neighborhoods in the city of Toronto. Gang impacted neighborhoods.
Yeah.
My dad was a 3-time Olympic.
Oh, your dad was? Okay, maybe that's
what yeah.
Wow.
I was a 3-time world team coach. For grappling, and I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I I've wrestled extensively because my dad never let me do anything else.
And
Yeah.
you're an author as well.
Yeah. I wrote a book after my dad passed away in 2008. At the funeral, there was a lot of stories that were coming out that I had never heard. My dad was a pretty humble fella, and he didn't speak hardly about any of his accolades. I knew he was Olympian. He never talked about the matches. I knew he was an all-time All-American for Oklahoma State. Dad never talked about any of those things, but after his funeral or during his funeral, a lot of these stories came out. So I wanted to collect them. And I collected them by interviewing people. And because I was a police officer, I'd worked in investigative bureaus. So it was like, you're interviewing people similar to what you were doing today, right? You're talking to me. So you're getting an in-depth account for what occurred. And, I almost discovered a brand new individual because my dad was my dad, like anybody else. I think, as you look at your father as a father figure, somebody, a provider, a disciplinarian, a role model. But I didn't see him as an athlete because that time had passed and I'd never seen him wrestle ever. But hearing these stories, and I didn't even know how he got a scholarship. And I heard that story from one of his coaches, and it was an amazing story. So I collected all these stories, I put them together, and it came to the point where, they were too good. And I thought, geez, let's make them into a book. And I just got lucky. I knew a publisher and made that happen. And I'm very goal orientated, and in my head, I wanted to make it into a movie. So at this point, we've had it written into a script, and now we're talking to a movie producer as well. So,
what a way to honor your father, though, just in general, to this point. Yeah.
Well, I mean, somebody that that I always looked up to, and was a huge role model, not just to me, but to a lot of the kids that he coached. Well respected in the wrestling community as well. I mean, I thought this was a perfect way to kind of, put the spotlight on him, because he never put the spotlight on himself. And I think it's deserving. And I think his story tells the story of the underdog. There are so many stories like his. But his story was, I think, something that people can learn from, because, that he faced so much adversity throughout his life. And, never once did he say to himself, yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to give up. He pursued and pursued. There was times where he was injured at Oklahoma State. He could have just packed it all up and said, you know what, I've been to 2 Olympics. I don't have to go to a third one. There is a time when he was, when he just got to Oklahoma State and he blew his knee. Actually, no, so he didn't blow his knee. He, first year he was academically ineligible. So he could have, packed it up there as well. But no, he stuck it out, and he kept pushing and pushing through. And those are the lessons in the book. There's far more than just those, because he did come across a lot of adversity. But those are the lessons in the book that I wanted to emphasize and show people that, look, life is full of malevolent bouts, but you can overcome some of those. I mean, it's an athlete's perspective.
It's an analogy to life.
Yeah, definitely.
Were you and Dad born in Toronto, or was it in?
No, I was born in London, Ontario. My father was an immigrant from the Netherlands. He came over with his parents and his family. I think 5 kids at the time, but he had 9 siblings later on in life. But he came over from the Netherlands just after the war, World War II.
It's that generation and the character. I mean, your father, there's something about integrity there that, you take those stories to the grave. It's being humble, not bragging. The ego wasn't there. It was a way of life.
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't a very talkative individual. Like he not like myself, I'm on the live stream and I'll chat up a storm here. I think I get that from my mom. I don't know. But he was very quiet, reserved. But when you spoke to him, he was he was an open book. He would tell you like it is. It's part of the Dutch culture to just lay it out like it is, no filters. So I think his honesty was valued by some of his teammates. I know Richard Deschatelet, one of his teammates on the '76 Olympic team, spoke very highly of him, and I think that was one of the qualities that he appreciated in my dad.
Before we continue with the how you got into policing and all that, what was your childhood like? Did you know that this is a path you wanted to take as policing?
Oh God, no. I I don't know. Like any kid, I mean, you respected policing. When I in the town I grew up in, London, Ontario, you respected policing. You were scared of the law. You didn't want to get in trouble. We had the regular police officers coming in the community. In particular, in London, it was a gentleman by the name of Constable Carter. That's what we knew him as. He'd come into my public school, Wilton Grove, and he'd give us these safety talks like any other police service, right? And I'd be in awe looking up at him, kind of like, oh, that's great. So that may have had a little bit of an influence. I kind of cite, like, there's two incidents where I really made up my mind about policing. Two influences. There are actually two spots. One was a spot when, and I do talk about this, but one was when I was lost, again, at a wrestling trip down in Ohio at the Ohio State Fair. And I was about 8 years old, and I was in there. They cleared out the barn and then laid down wrestling mats. The cows were next door. And my dad would coach the wrestlers when they were there. So we took a team down there, and he's coaching them, and I'm 8 years old. So I just wandered off into the fair, got lost. And, I'm crying as an 8-year-old. I have no idea where I am. I went back to the venue. My dad wasn't there. So, I'm just beside myself, not knowing what's going on. And a state trooper actually found me, and, he bent down and he actually just comforted me, and he took me back to the station, and eventually he was able to get me back to my father. But I always remember that crisp, clean uniform, the demeanor of the officer. This is somebody that I kind of feared, because I've been, police officers generally, like, for little kids, they're told, if you're bad, you're going to jail, and that police officer is going to take you away. Which, by the way, don't ever tell your kid that. They're never going to come up to their police officer for help. But that was my perspective. That was one of the early childhood memories. I had other ones where there was a negative experience as well. And I went to school at Fresno City College in Fresno, California, and in the morning, we would go to the cafeteria. The wrestlers would just hang out. And, we went in that morning, and there was a girl that I was sweet on, that worked behind the cashier. So, and I knew her, I had talked to her and stuff like that. So, I'd go in there in the mornings, and I'd go in there with my buddies. We'd buy our breakfast, and then we'd go to classes. So this particular morning, it was, we did the same thing, same routine, sat down, and then the police officer that was on campus, police officer, he came over, and he said, "Come with me." And of course, I have no idea what he's asking me to do, why. So I come with him because I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I'm in a different country. Go into this back room, and he proceeds to accuse me of stealing a sandwich, and I am just floored. And I'm scared because I don't know what he's talking about. And, he's badgering me. It was like one of those,
interrogation.
good cop, bad cop, but there was no good cop. Like, he was just, here's a 19-year-old kid, nobody in the state of California to kind of lean on, thinking that, I'm going to jail. I'm going to lose my student visa. I'm going to get kicked off the team. All these things are going through my head. Like, what the heck? And I didn't do anything to deserve it. So then in walks one of my teammates, and he says to the police officer, "I did it." So what had happened is I was falsely accused by one of and pointed out by one of the workers there at the at the cafeteria. But it wasn't me. It was in fact him. Thank God he stepped up. I mean, he didn't have to. He could have just got away with it, and I still wouldn't even know. I didn't even know he did it, and I probably wouldn't be here today. But those were two incidents that kind of really influenced the way I police, because I was like, I never wanted to be that individual that didn't believe in an individual. I want to give that, when I'm speaking to somebody, even if it's somebody that's accused of a crime, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Did they actually do it? And I want to have enough, I guess, compassion to understand their life as well if they did do it. And that, I think, I came from the Ohio State trooper. Just because I knew that police officers are human, and they should be human, or act as they're a human. We shouldn't be, robotic in any sense. And I think that if you become robotic, and then you don't take any input in, and you fail to become that compassionate officer that people often need.
So true. Mm-hmm. So how did you get into policing? Was it obviously all these life lessons and, experiences, but oftentimes those experiences, like being falsely accused, looking back, it made you who you are today. All those ups and downs, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, policing wasn't really on the radar. Back then, I was going to school for athletic therapy. Came back, ended up taking a year off after my junior college, and then I went to Eastern Michigan. I finished up there, came back, didn't have a job, and mom and dad moved back home with mom and dad, and they wanted me to get a job. I ended up getting a job with a young offenders open custody detention center, and I absolutely loved that job. I mean, I was a youth counselor there, and the positive influence I had on kids there was amazing. And from there, I actually, I thought, okay, this is great. So I went into a secure custody that's located at Fanshawe College area there. It's a building right beside the campus there, and it's Genest Detention Centre for youth. So I worked there, and same thing. I was able to counsel these kids that were in conflict with the law, be a mentor, those sort of things. From there, one of my buddies, actually, he got into corrections, and I thought, oh, okay, great. I get into corrections, probably get paid a little bit more, right? So I ended up applying to corrections, got into corrections, and then I started working at the young offender facilities at the Elgin Middlesex Detention Centre. Did that for about a year, and then they lost their YO program, so I had to work with adults. And with adults, it's pretty much just housing them. You're not doing much else but feeding them and making sure they get showers. There's no counseling going on there. You're not really talking to them. They're just being housed. So policing was kind of the next step. Get out of the jail area. And I applied to Toronto. It was the first place I applied to. I thought, I apply and I'll get all this experience doing. I thought I won't get hired. I got to get some interview experience. So I interviewed with Toronto, and I thought, okay, that went good. And then I got another interview. I was, okay, that went all right. And then I, of course, writing down things, how I could better myself, how I could, in the next interview, because I didn't believe that I was going to get this job 20 years ago. So after the second interview, I get this call while I'm walking through the mall, Masonville Mall in London, Ontario there. And I think there's a movie theater up there at the time. I was going to the movies, and I answered the phone, and it says, hey, this is Toronto Police Service. We'd like to offer you a position of cadet. And I'm just like, because I really had made, even consciously accepted the fact that maybe I would be moving to Toronto. I thought, okay, I'm going to have this interview. It'll be good. I'll apply to London. I'll apply to Sarnia. I'll apply to, all these other places. And bang, I get hired. And it's kind of it was a little bit of a culture shock. I said yes to the offer. And then when I finished the training and I came up to Toronto, my goodness, I didn't know what the city was like, because I grew up in, in London, Ontario. I moved to the United States, California, and in Michigan. I stayed away from Toronto. I didn't go there that often. And then I come up to Toronto and I experienced this, it was a culture shock, and a lot of the things that were occurring. I didn't, one of the things that stuck out in my head was, why are these buses running all the way through the night? Because London actually, they stopped at 11 o'clock. Little things like that I was like, my God, what's happening here? And of course, I started working in 31 Division, right away. And I don't know if you know where that is here, but it's Jane and Finch, which is a gang impacted neighborhood. So I experienced policing, like some pretty eye opening incidents in policing. I think it was my first week where, I went to an individual that was shot. I'd never even seen a person that was deceased, in my entire life. That I saw one maybe, at a funeral, but then to come up here and see somebody murdered was a shock.
For sure.
But then working at 31 Division, unfortunately, that became more and more of a regularity at times.
Seeing the violence, say 20 years ago, is it the same as it is today?
You know, I know the stats that are occurring. I think there's more shootings, and I mean, and this is not an official stat coming from me. I know that there's more occurring. Like, I don't know about homicides. I think it's low compared to a U.S. state, but it's up there. We hope it was lower. I was working in 31 the year of the gun, so I remember that was a rough year. A lot of these kids are getting, more access to firearms, easier access to firearms, which is unfortunate. And you can, order things off the internet nowadays.
They're
It's making
printing
it a
them.
heck of a lot. Yeah, they're printing them. Yeah, can be. It's really really tough to kind of mitigate.
It is. Over the summer here in Calgary, Alberta, we had, I don't know how many shootings. I
Yeah.
was thinking, what is going on? Is this a mental health issue? Is this something coming out of a pandemic? People are upset. What's going on in this world of ours today, our nation?
Yeah. I think there's a bunch of things. I mean, obviously I think social media has a big play on things. Our mindsets are being, let's say, influenced by algorithms. We are more divided these days because of that, I think. And as a result, I think, if you have I guess, a dislike for anything, it's going to be heightened because of those algorithms. I hope people are catching on to that more and more, but I think if you view it down the states, you see the division between political parties, you see the division between political parties up here. I'm sure it comes down to a level of gangs as well, and then even with what's happening with policing here in Ontario, we've had five police officers murdered.
I just saw you had posted that on your Twitter yesterday or whatever, but and then obviously Burnaby just recently.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think that there is erosion of public perception of police officers after the George Floyd, of course, that
Mhm.
incident, and any incident like that in the U.S. For some reason, that trickles up here, and we get, as police officers, we get pasted with the same brush. And I think what ends up happening is if an individual has the propensity or proclivity, sorry, I guess, to cause violence, then we get made an easier target when we are demonized. And unfortunately, I think that's what's occurring in this day and age. And that's just my opinion. That's
Well,
there's nothing.
your opinion's valid because I have a lot of friends that are in law enforcement.
Mm.
They say, off duty, they're my friends, they're my neighbors, they're everyday moms, dads, brothers, sisters. How do we protect these individuals? Because it's just a job, it's a uniform. And, the more that this is happening, that we've just seen of all this violence towards police officers here in Canada, I don't think anyone's going to want to police anymore. Then what's going to happen in our world?
Yeah, well, I mean, you got to think about that. There's a lot of things that are occurring, and that may influence people on taking this job. It's not, as you can see, there's a lot of negativity that is pushed upon the police officers as it is. The media doesn't speak highly of us. They focus on the negative stuff, and that's why on social media you see a lot of coppers doing these things, because they're trying to show people that we're doing other things. We're helping the homeless, we're helping gang members get out of gangs, like we are with Engage 416. But when we're demonized in the media, and really, I mean, for no, it's a false narrative in most cases, right? I mean, we don't have a lot of those incidents that are occurring in the U.S. occurring up here. Um, but because of that, it erodes public's confidence, and of course, it makes it easier for things like that to happen.
Mhm. How are
Mm-hmm.
you doing through this whole thing of seeing five officers and obviously now in Burnaby six officers and within months?
Um, it tugs on your strings. That you kind of analyze what you're doing and why you're doing it, and I think that's any officer that wears the uniform. Is it really worth it? My family. It's a heck of a sacrifice these officers have suffered. Um,
Mhm.
it's tough. I don't know. I sometimes I'll be thinking about it. Just sitting in somewhere, and you just don't understand what's going on in the world, and you're just kind of lost. And I wouldn't say that I'm depressed. I wouldn't say that. I think it hurts. At various levels. Um, like any police officer, we try not to let that stuff in, but it seeps in. It does. The negativity, the constantly being called names. It doesn't matter where you go. Everything like that. Not just these killings, but the negativity that's spewed upon this profession. Um, it doesn't help. I mean, it can affect you. There's a lot of literature on the police subculture that talks about a lot of the negativity that is thrown upon police officers and how it can affect their mindset. Um, and if they're not careful, it can be detrimental. And I just talked with a guy by the name of John Kelly in Florida who he experienced all that sort of thing. And he had the wherewithal to kind of get himself out, but he also started a business down in the US where he coaches law enforcement officers and he actually takes them out of the situations, the negative situations. He gets them to recognize the negative situations that they're in, whether it's being drug use or alcoholism and stuff like that. These officers will reach out to him and say, hey, he'll say, hey, I've been through this. This is what we got to clean up. And it's a one step at a time sort of thing. So there are things out there now to help us out. Um, and it's good that those things are occurring, but it can really have an effect on your psyche. I try to, do a lot of things just to kind of separate myself from the profession. I don't have a lot of friends that are in policing. I don't hang out with a lot of friends that are in policing because I don't want to talk shop when I'm doing my own thing. I coach young kids because I find that's it's rewarding. I'm trying to give back to my community in different aspects. I help out with the swim club as well. So I try to keep myself grounded. I read outside of I do read some police books, but I also read classics and other stuff.
Any Daniel Steele?
No Daniel Steele. No, no Daniel Steele. Alexander Solzhenitsyn. This is one of the ones I absolutely adore. His stuff. I read a couple of his,
Have
but
you
good
read
stuff.
Carl Jung?
Carl Jung, yeah, I have a little bit about the shadow and stuff like that. I really, you start to have a better perspective on things when you realize that too. Especially when you consider his teachings.
The Shadow Effect is a remarkable book. You need to check out.
Yeah, I'll have to do that. I do have one up in my library, and I haven't touched it yet because I got a whole list of books that I'm trying to get through.
Yeah.
I keep on buying books, and I know I have these lists that I'm going through. Like I got 5 books that I bought. University of Michigan's one of the swim coaches down there sent me a list of books, and I've been trying to plow through these things. They're really good books in their own mindset. But again, then I have probably 50 more behind that. So prioritizing them are tough.
When we look at the west coast of Canada, we had a few years ago the gang violence, actually for quite some time,
Mm-hmm.
in Kelowna and so the Okanagan, Vancouver. What is the gang violence like in Toronto? Is it Groups of
Um,
10 kids. Is that what it's like?
well, I think there's more than 10 kids. I think there's 10 kids that are, maybe a handful of kids that are actually committing um, these acts, these violent acts. And this is, this is not from my knowledge of any investigation. This is just a hypothesis. But, knowing the gang subculture and reading and and researching it, it's often just a few of the kids that cause these malevolent acts, but they get, they cause a lot of stir when it happens in, places that they aren't supposed to happen. Like we've had shootings downtown now, we've had them at the Eaton Center, and that's where, we get a lot of, exposure to the media. There's a lot of, people that are, involved in the gangs, but, these are gangs, some of the gangs with, are hang-arounds or, they just wannabes. But the other thing too that's fueling some of this, and we've got articles up here in Toronto, I'm sure you have them up in Vancouver too, but talking about drill music. I've read a book called Ballad of the Bullets. I can't remember the author's name, but it talks about drill music. And that book reflected a lot of what was occurring, with these articles in the Toronto Sun is saying is that, the drill music is fueling a lot of the violence, because what gangs are doing is they want to get out of these neighborhoods, and to do so they, with every, I guess, other avenue, they're kind of blocked, whether it's through school or employment. Some kids, they're not scholastically strong. Other kids, they can't get a job because of maybe their postal code. So they find other means of achieving status in their community, achieving status anywhere, or trying to get out of the area where they're in. And what they end up doing is they look to YouTube and they start these videos, because I've seen a gentleman by the name of Chief Keef who did this himself in the Chicago area. He started rapping. He was a gang member down with the Black Disciples in the Chicago area, I believe. And one of his tracks got picked up, I believe it was Kanye West. Correct me if I'm wrong. And as a result of that, boom, his stock went up. And a lot of these kids are doing the same thing up here with YouTube and doing their own tracks. I mean, you can Google, whatever city you're in, I'm sure there'll be some drill music there. The problem is that to actually get hits on these YouTube accounts or your videos, you have to be authentic. You got to be from the neighborhood, and whatever you're talking about, you got to be legit about. So if you're rapping about being in a gang, you better be in a gang. Otherwise, you're not going to get hits on it. So these kids kind of push themselves, because they want out of the neighborhood. They push themselves into these gangs, and then they, have to walk the walk, unfortunately, and that can be very detrimental. But back in the day, you had to go to an agent and get your music looked at or listened to or whatever it was. These kids have it a heck of a lot easier, because that doesn't happen. All they have to do is upload a video onto YouTube and bang, it's there. And then these record companies just have to look for the music video with the most hits on it. And that's what they do. There's rappers up here that have tons and tons of hits, and music studios pick them up. I won't say their names. But because of that, it's opened the floodgates for some of the other kids too. And these kids are getting involved. They want to be authentic. And this is what the book talks about. Ballad of the Bullet talks about is actually, that's how they're trying to get out. And as a result of that, being authentic, these kids are getting killed because, they're talking smack to other gang members. And of course, in the gang community, if you watch any gang movie or read any gang book, if you slight any gang member or a gang in any way, there's retaliatory action. And that come in the form of a beating, stabbing, or a murder, whether it's firearm stabbings or just fists. So it's a deadly game. But these kids are willing to pay the price, because they want out of this neighborhood, and they want, this status that they can't earn through regular, avenues that myself and yourself can pursue. Because some of them, like you said, They can't achieve that schooling. So some of the things that happen in some of these areas that I work in is, if you have a learning disability, and I don't know if this is occurring now, but if you have a learning disability, some of these kids are told, here's a bus ticket. We don't have the individuals here to help you out, but here's a bus ticket. Take it down to, X marks the spot place, and, you'll get help there. Well, if you're given a bus ticket to a 14, 13-year-old kid in grade 9, they're the likelihood of them actually falling through is going to be like, nah, I don't think so. I'm not going to go this time. So they start hanging out on the streets more and more, and they find friends, like-minded friends, and then it just spirals.
Did you ever work in gang suppression?
No, prevention. So, I mean, working in Jane and Finch, I mean, it was pretty much gang suppression. I mean, we dealt with a lot of kids that were involved in the gang subculture. Partner of mine and myself, we really tried to clean the neighborhood up in regards to the drug dealing that was occurring. There's a plaza in one of our areas that was nicknamed by the residents, and it's actually in a book that I've read as well. It's the $1 Million Plaza, because drug dealers there make a lot of money. That's the community naming it, not police officers. That's the community. And we took it upon ourselves to kind of help out the community and stop that from happening. We did for a bit, but when you leave that area, you leave that hole there, and then people just come back. So it's suppression works, but the problem is that as soon as an officer leaves that area or is assigned to another place, if there's not other like-minded officers filling that gap, you're in trouble. And that's why I like the Engage 416 initiative, because it treats the prevention and intervention side, things that have been missing from policing for so long. I guess it's always been suppression. Being a correctional officer, I can tell you, when the kids would come in and they get arrested for a crime, they'd come in, they'd learn new skills from other inmates or young offenders. They would recruit from those areas as well. That's my experience as a correctional officer. I know that was occurring. I don't know how much rehabilitation was occurring. I mean, there was schooling that was going on while I was there. We had a classroom where the kids had to go to school, but a lot of these things were still going on. So it's when you go to prison, and if you do any readings on the gang subculture, it's the same thing. These guys are getting arrested, and they're just learning new tricks of the trade, or they're recruiting new gang members. There's a good book on that in the U.S. It's called The Mexican Mafia. Actually, a gang expert from Battle Creek, Michigan, actually introduced me to that book. But it talks about the prison system and how the gang subcultures are entrenched there. I mean, it's tough. So I think the answer is, with suppression, because the answer is intervention and prevention, but suppression has an integral part, because suppression, there are gang members out there that can't be saved. They have that mindset that, I want to be part of this. I've got status. I'm entrenched in this already. And they thrive off it. There are ones like that. Unfortunately, reaching them is pretty tough, and that's why at Engage 416 we have neighborhood teams that actually will reach into the community and do outreach and actually perform that for us. But it's a tough egg to crack. I mean, those kids. So we got to focus on the ones that we can, either stop, the ones that are on the cusp of getting involved, or the ones that are already involved that are ready to come out.
How old are these kids, generally speaking?
Well, man, I really, within Toronto, I mean, if you take a look at the YouTube videos, that's the best explanation. You go on the YouTube videos in Toronto gang, not gangs, but Toronto drill music. Check out the faces and just make an estimate for yourself. I don't have any data on, and that's why I don't want to even say it.
Is there a way though to, I don't know, help these individuals out of the so-called hood, or how, get a job or find them better avenues rather than, see this rap music, or sorry, drill music, and
Well, and that's what the Engage 416 program is all about, right? We treat the risk factors. There's tons of risk factors. In fact, academia has produced a long list of risk factors that actually heighten the propensity for gang involvement, or um, I guess criminality. And if you treat those risk factors, and you're talking about, I can give a couple examples of the risk factors. Is single parent homes, or homes that parental units don't function well, poor grades, alcohol abuse, drug abuse. I have a whole list. I usually have them in front of me, but actually, I think I can maybe get one here. Just try not to go off camera too much, but yeah, like I got a placard that we used to give out at the gang prevention town hall meetings we used to go to. And there's like six headings. There's major risk factors, community risk factors, individual risk factors, school risk factors, peer risk factors, and family risk factors. And, each heading has looks like 8 bullet points underneath it. And this is what we try to do is with these risk factors, we identify them through our community teams, their neighborhood teams, or ourselves. And we treat them. We try to treat those things. So, for instance, if for schooling, poor school performance, we have a program that we're developing now where there's going to be some tutoring that is occurring in one of our community centers. We're going to bring kids in from the local schools to do that. Kids that we've identified that need it, that are at the cusp of getting involved in gangs. We're helping them out. School, again, I'm just going to hit on some of the schools, but low educational aspirations. These kids, when you go to these communities, one of the things that's quite shocking to learn is they don't get out of the communities. I've talked to kids that, on my podcasts that live in these areas, or, and they're adults now, that have said they'd never been on a field trip. I can remember taking one kid in my area down to an event downtown and with his parents, and his parents have said they'd never been downtown. We've lived in the city for 20 years, but never been downtown, never saw the Toronto sign, never saw the CN Tower. That kind of floored me, just knowing that. But that's one of the things when you talk about low educational aspirations. If you've never been out of the community, you don't know what's outside. You don't know what to aspire to. I want to be because you can imagine if you went to I guess a field trip at the Toronto Science Center, that could just stimulate your mind with all sorts of things, and then you could aspire to be something like that. So little things like that, that we try to treat. We're exposing our kids to a robotics program. We're trying to develop that right now. So can you imagine that the impact of a program like that in a community that's never had it before, never been exposed to that before? Just something so small, like a program that will run maybe, I think we're going to do 8 weeks. But that will have a huge impact on so many of these kids' lives. We just did a soccer program. Soccer's not a popular program in our areas, but we got kids out to it. And you know what? They're having fun. They're having an amazing time doing this. And you see the smile on these kids' faces. And these are from gang-impacted neighborhoods. These are the same kids that are talking about that don't go on field trips. We're affording them the opportunities to do these sort of things. And by doing that, you're treating these risk factors. And hopefully by treating these risk factors, we have a positive effect on these young kids, right? But that's not the only thing. I could talk for hours about some of our program, our referral program. We also do mental health counseling, for those kids that actually have been involved in shootings or victims or perpetrators, PTSD counseling for these kids. Learning difficulties, we get, their help with that. That's the other thing, drug and alcohol abuse. We get them help with that as well. So addiction counseling, all sorts of things. And again, like it's a huge list. You can see it right there. If I read it off, it would go off
quite a bit. Yes.
Yeah, for a couple minutes. And I don't want to do that too.
No, for sure. Before we get going here, Shawn, what is the legacy you would like to leave behind when it's all said and done? And what do you hope for?
I never really think about it as legacy. I had a really good mentor in the form of a sergeant with the Toronto Police Service, Steve Hicks. He was a very community orientated. He retired. The impact he had on the community was amazing. When he left, there was a hole, and then I think we needed to fill that. We didn't do the greatest job of filling it. We filled it a little bit, and I think with the Engage 416, we're trying to fill it even more. But for legacy, when I think of legacy, I think of my dad. I think about how he impacted some of the kids, and even the families that he did, because he coached wrestling, and he coached at a club level and high school as well. And at his funeral, we talked about his funeral before, but at his funeral, the parents would come back when the kids weren't there, and the parents were there in the I don't know if you call it a greeting line or receiving line or whatever you call it, but they were lined up to talk to the family. And the parents, I remember the one parent coming up and shaking my hand, looking me in the eyes and saying, "If it wasn't for your dad, our child would have been down a horrible, horrible road. We just want to thank you and the family for letting him sacrifice his life to save ours." And, that was a pretty profound statement to hear. And it really made me understand the person that he was. Again, like we talked about, I knew a different person, but hearing that perspective from a different person, I think that's the kind of thing that I'd love to do or be remembered for. But that's not what I'm striving for. What I'm striving for is just making people's lives better if I can, because I think everybody deserves a chance. And I know that's not a popular, mantra in policing. A lot of the criminals they're criminals, just throw the key away. I think everybody's got a story. We got to take a listen to it, and if we can help, we can help.
Oh, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about your dad a lot. I lost my mom 3 years ago now.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Does grief get easier, or do you think about your father every day in different ways? Yeah.
You know what? The pain is always there, but it lessens with time. And that's what somebody said that to me, and it certainly has. I think of my father every day. There's not a day that it goes by. Anytime I get a chance to mention him, I'll mention him, because you know what? He meant so much to me. And I think, when you talk about somebody that's passed on, people get uncomfortable. They're like, "Oh, I don't have to." He's going to break down and cry, But no, at this point, I don't break down and cry. Maybe the odd time, if I'm driving home and I have some sentimental thoughts, maybe I might break down, but it hasn't happened in quite a while. But I honor him every day in my thoughts. By what I do. He's taught me so many things, even after his death, rediscovering who he was, because of who I discovered who he was, and the perseverance that he went through. I went to, as a police officer, after he passed away, I reapplied to university, and I wanted to get a justice studies degree. And I actually finished the 4-year degree here while I was at the Toronto Police Service.
Congratulations.
And I always wanted to do it, but I always put it off because of, I didn't have the time. I made excuses. And because of my dad's perseverance and overcoming adversity and achieving things, the story that everybody told me, because of that, that's why I said, you know what, we're going to go after that. And that's my attitude now, with just about anything. We talked about the book and how I want to go after a movie deal, right? If I don't try, it's not going to happen. Right. And that's
always no.
Yeah, exactly. And that's your no. Right. You put up the barrier right away as soon as you say no to yourself, and nothing you can achieve if that's the way. So sometimes you can't listen to yourself. You just got to say, you know what, it's a hurdle. Get over that mental hurdle. Let's see where we go from now. And all it took was me writing things down on the paper, one week at a time, collecting these stories. It snowballed into what I wanted to be, become a movie now. It's a script. I didn't think I'd get it written into a script. I just didn't think that it would. And then I knew somebody that it was in the movie industry, asked him about it. And it took me a while to ask, because I had that mental hurdle saying, he might not want to do it. He jumped at it and he did it. He had it done, I think, in a couple of months. We've had a couple of meetings with producers now. So man, like it's taken off. I don't know if it's gonna fly, but I'll kick myself. I'd kick myself if I didn't do it. So at least now I can say, well, I tried, and you know what? It didn't happen. Oh well. Or hey, yeah, it happened, and look what we got.
One life, right? And then the regrets. We don't want to look back and say, I wish I did that.
Yeah, I have enough regrets. So
No, I
yeah.
appreciate that. Well, thank you so much again, Shawn.
No, well, thank you for having me on this, man. I appreciate you asking me. And whatever I can do to help you guys up there in Vancouver, let me know.
Calgary. I'm in Calgary.
Calgary, sorry,
Yeah.
Calgary.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, I thought it was. When I was watching one of your podcasts, and the guest was from Vancouver.
Vancouver, yes, yeah.
Yeah. So I was just watching that, and I'm just okay. He said he was from Vancouver, so there's the confusion right there. My apologies. Awesome, man.
Cool. Thanks again, Shawn.
All right, man.
All
You
right,
have a good day
week.
and have a good weekend, man.
As
Stay
well.
safe.